My wife and I had just bought a lake house to retire in. On the first day, she stood on the porch, laughing through tears. Finally, we have a place that truly belongs to us. 3 weeks later, a moving truck rolled into our driveway. My son stepped out first. "Only a few weeks, Dad." Then my daughter-in-law pointed upstairs. "We'll take the room with the lake view." By morning, her sister was live streaming from my living room, and my own son was helping them change the front locks like we didn't exist. I am grateful you are here with me today. Before we go further, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I read everyone. A note: this story contains fictional elements crafted for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any similarity to actual names or places is coincidental, but the lesson it carries is one worth keeping. I've been a railroad man for 37 years. I know what it feels like when something runs off the rails, not with a bang, not all at once, but quietly. A slow lean to one side. A vibration under your feet that doesn't belong there. By the time most people notice, it's already too late to do anything about it. That's exactly how it started. Quiet. Beautiful even. We moved into the lake house on a Thursday in June 2024. Torch Lake up in Antrim County, Michigan, one of those places that makes you wonder why you waited so long. The water was so clear you could count the rocks on the bottom 20 feet out. Nora stepped onto the back porch for the first time and pressed both palms flat against the wooden railing, like she needed to make sure it was real and not something she'd dreamed up. Cliff. Her voice cracked right down the middle of my name. It's exactly how I pictured it. I stepped up behind her and covered her hands with mine. Her fingers were trembling not from cold, but from something she'd been holding back for a long time. 40 years in the making, I said. We earned every inch of it. She laughed, that soft, unsteady laugh she pulls out when she's too close to crying and too proud to let it happen. Her shoulders shook once under my hands, then she straightened up and pressed her lips together and looked out at the water like she was having a private conversation with it. I didn't interrupt. Some moments belong to the person having them. The house wasn't grand. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a screened porch facing the water, and a kitchen with enough counter space for 2 people who actually cooked. Nothing wasted, nothing missing. I'd spent 37 years as a maintenance engineer for the Michigan Central Railroad, crawling under locomotives at 5 in the morning, writing incident reports at midnight, teaching young guys who thought a clipboard made them smarter than the machine. Nora had spent 20 years as a school librarian in Grand Rapids, shelving books and reading to children who needed somewhere quiet to exist. We were not rich people. We were disciplined people. There is a difference, and it matters. I paid for that house in cash. Every single dollar. When the time came to put the deed in a name, I chose Nora's. My attorney, a decent man named Patterson, retired. Now looked up from the paperwork and asked, "You sure about this, Cliff?" 100%, I said. "Mind if I ask why?" I leaned back in the chair and looked at the ceiling for a second. "Because I'm 71 years old with a heart that's already had 1 warning shot," I said. "If I go first and the odds say I might, I don't want Nora sitting in a lawyer's office for 6 months while strangers sort through probate paperwork and charge her $400 an hour to do it. I want her to wake up the morning after my funeral and know the house is hers. No waiting, no forms. No one deciding what she deserves." Patterson nodded slowly and slid the deed across the desk toward her. Nora signed her name in her careful, even handwriting. She didn't rush it. She pressed the pen down like each letter meant something. I thought I was being a smart man. I thought I was being a good husband. I was both of those things. I just didn't account for what a desperate person could do with that kind of generosity. That first night, after Nora went to bed early, worn through from the drive, The unpacking and the sheer emotional weight of finally arriving somewhere we'd been moving toward for decades. I sat alone on the dock. Just me, the dark water, and the sound of something rustling through the reeds on the far bank. I thought about the boy we lost. I won't go into all of it yet. Some pain needs to be approached from the side, not straight on. But I'll say this, the lake wasn't just a pretty view for Nora. Something had happened on water years before that had left a wound that never fully closed. This house, this specific place with its clear water and its quiet mornings, was her way of sitting beside that wound instead of running from it. Her way of saying, I'm still here. It didn't take everything from me. I stayed on that dock for a long time watching the surface of Torch Lake breathe in the dark. We made it, I said to someone who wasn't there anymore. The water held still, patient the way water always is. I went inside around 11, turned the lock on the back door, and slept better than I had in years. Deep, dreamless sleep. The kind that only comes when you finally stopped moving and landed somewhere that feels like yours. 3 weeks later, a moving truck pulled into our driveway. Nobody called to ask. I heard it before I saw it. A low, grinding rumble coming up the gravel driveway, not the sound of a car or even a pickup, but something heavier. Something with purpose. I was standing at the kitchen window with my third cup of coffee going cold in my hand when the orange panels of a 26-foot moving truck rolled into view and my stomach turned over before my brain had time to catch up. I set the mug down on the counter, walked to the front door, pushed it open. The truck shuddered to a stop near the garage, and before the engine even cut off, the passenger door swung open, and my son stepped out. Derek Marsh, 42 years old, pressed polo shirt hair, combed back, clean, grinning at the lake, like a man who'd just won something. Dad. He crossed the yard in long strides and pulled me into a hug, strong arms, warm grip, the kind of embrace that used to mean everything to me. I hugged him back. My hands patted his shoulders the way they always had, but something sat wrong in my chest, heavy and unmoving. I pulled back and looked at him. Derek, I didn't know you were coming. He waved a hand like the detail was barely worth mentioning. Timing got a little complicated, but hey, here we are. He turned and spread his arms at the lake. Dad, this place. Seriously, you and Mom knocked it out of the park. What's with the truck? I asked. His grin stayed exactly where it was. Okay, so here's the thing. He shifted his weight, rubbed the back of his neck. Vanessa and I ran into a situation with our lease. Landlord sold the building, new owner wants everyone cleared out. It happened fast, faster than we expected. How fast? End of last month. He met my eyes without flinching. I know I should have called sooner, Dad. I dropped the ball on that. But it's temporary, few weeks, maybe a month, just until we lock down something new. You've got the space. It just makes sense. Before I could say a word, the rear door of the truck rolled up with a crash that echoed across the water, and Vanessa Marsh jumped down from the cargo bay. My daughter-in-law, 38 years old, dark hair, pulled back, moving with the brisk efficiency of someone who had already made all the decisions and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. She snapped her fingers at a young man with a dolly and pointed toward the house. Careful with the armoire, she said. Then she looked up and gave me a smile that landed somewhere just short of warm. Clifton, this place is even better in person. The light in here must be incredible in the mornings. It is, I said. Perfect. She turned back to direct the moving. I watched a leather sectional sofa come off that truck, then a king-size bed frame. Then what appeared to be an entire home office monitors a standing desk, filing boxes stacked 4 high. My jaw tightened. A beat-up sedan pulled up behind the truck, and out stepped Tara Cole, Vanessa's younger sister, 33 years old, earbuds, and already talking to someone on her phone. She was carrying a ring light under one arm, like it was standard luggage. She walked past me up the porch steps without making eye contact, pushed open my front door, and disappeared inside. I turned to Derek. "That's a lot of furniture for a few weeks." "Storage fees are brutal right now," he said smoothly. "No point paying for a unit when you've got the room. It'll all go into the garage once we sort it out." Nora appeared at the screen door. She took one look at the truck, one look at me, and something moved across her face. Not surprise, not panic, something more careful than either of those. She pushed the door open and said, "Derek, let me put some coffee on," in a voice so even it almost covered the tension underneath. That was Nora, 68 years old, and still the most composed person in any room she walked into. Inside, Derek sat at the kitchen table and talked about the new neighborhood they were looking at, about a business opportunity he was developing, about how much Milo and Lily, his kids, were going to love the lake. He talked the way he always had, easy, confident, filling the air so completely that asking a hard question felt like interrupting something important. I let him talk. I poured him coffee. I watched his hands. Then I heard footsteps above us. Heavy, unhurried, moving from the hallway into the large guest room, the one with the east-facing windows and the unobstructed view straight out over the water. The best room in the house. The footsteps stopped. A drawer opened, closed. Derek kept talking. I set my mug down. "Who's upstairs?" Vanessa's just getting the room set up," he said. "She wanted to get organized before the rest of the boxes come in." My hand gripped the edge of the counter. I breathed through it. "Derek, your mother and I were planning to use that room." He tilted his head, and his expression shifted into something that managed to look like genuine concern. "Dad, think about it practically. You and Mom, you don't need the stairs. Ground floor is easier, better for both of you. Safer, honestly." "We're not that old," I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. He raised both hands. "Of course not. I just meant logistically." "I'll talk to your mother," I said. I found Nora in the backyard, standing near the garden beds, arms crossed, staring at the upstairs window. From inside the guest room, Vanessa's voice drifted down bright and certain, talking to someone on her phone. "No, it's perfect. It's bigger than our old bedroom, faces the lake, honestly. I don't know why they weren't using it more." I felt something hot climb up the back of my neck. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Nora," I started. She turned and put her hand flat on my chest. Her eyes were steady, but there was a fire in them I recognized, the kind she kept banked low until she needed it. "Not yet, Cliff," she said firmly. "Let them get comfortable. Let them think everything is going their way. You're asking me to stand here and watch. I'm asking you to be smarter than they think you are." Her jaw was set like iron. "Can you do that?" I looked at her for a long moment. My heart was pounding. My chest was tight with something between fury and grief. "Yeah," I said finally. "I can do that." She held my gaze for another second, then nodded once and walked back inside. I stood in the backyard alone, looking up at the window of what used to be the best room in my house. By the time the last box came off that truck, I already knew this wasn't going to be a few weeks. I have unlocked a lot of doors in my life. Engine room hatches, storage compartments on freight cars. The front door of every house I ever owned, 4 of them over 43 years of marriage. I never thought twice about any of it. You put the key in, you turn it, you walk in. That's how it works when something belongs to you. The morning I came home from fishing and had to ring the bell to get into my own house was the morning something shifted inside me. Not broke, shifted. Like a load that's been stacked wrong and finally settles into a position you can't ignore. I'd been out on the dock since 6. Caught 2 decent walleye, threw them back. The air was cool and the lake was flat, and for about 2 hours, I almost forgot what was waiting for me inside. Almost. I came up the path around 8:30, tackle box in one hand, rod in the other, and reached for the door handle out of pure habit. It didn't move. I tried again. Nothing. I put the rod down, pulled out my key, fit it into the lock, and it stopped halfway. Wrong key, wrong lock. They had changed the locks on my front door. I stood there on my own porch, staring at a lock I didn't recognize, and felt something cold and slow spread through my chest. Then I heard footsteps inside, and the door swung open. It was Tara. She was in pajamas, earbuds around her neck, holding a smoothie. She looked at my tackle box, then at my face, and said, "Oh, Vanessa had the locks upgraded. Security thing." Then she turned and walked back down the hall toward the living room. I picked up my fishing rod, walked inside, set everything down in the mudroom. From the living room, Tara's voice floated back to me, bright, performative, the voice people use when they're talking to a camera rather than a person. "Good morning, guys. Welcome back to the channel. I'm here at my sister's lake house, and honestly, the vibe out here is absolutely immaculate." My living room? She was broadcasting from my living room. I walked to the kitchen doorway and stood there. Nora was at the stove, back turned, stirring something. I could see the tension in her shoulders from across the room, the way she held herself just a little too straight, a little too controlled. "They changed the locks," I said. Nora turned around. Her eyes met mine, and the look on her face made my chest tighten, not anger, something worse. Resignation mixed with a kind of quiet, burning resolve. I know," she said. "Vanessa said she told you." She told me after she'd already done it. My jaw was working. In my own house, Nora. I had to stand on my own porch and wait for someone to let me in. Nora set down her spoon and crossed the kitchen toward me. She put both hands on my arms, gripping, not patting, like she was trying to hold something in place. "I know," she said again, and her voice was tight. "I know exactly what that felt like, Cliff, because I watched it happen from this window, and my stomach dropped straight to the floor." "Then why?" "Because I need you to hold on," she said through her teeth, low enough that Tara couldn't hear. "I need you to hold on just a little longer. Something is telling me if we push back right now, we lose the advantage. Do you understand me?" I looked at her face. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, with something sharper than that, something I hadn't seen in a while. "What advantage?" I asked. "They changed our locks, Nora. And that's exactly the kind of thing that matters later," she said. "Trust me." I wanted to argue. Every single part of me wanted to go find Derek right then and have the conversation we should have had the day that truck pulled up. Instead, I pressed my forehead down against Nora's, closed my eyes, and breathed. "I trust you," I said, "but you better be right about this." "I'm always right," she said, and despite everything, I almost smiled. That night, I lay in the small room downstairs and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere above me, Tara was still talking to her camera, her voice carrying through the floor in waves. And I started to wonder, when exactly did I become a visitor in my own home? There are things a man can lose and find a way to rebuild. A job, a friendship, even a house if it comes to that. But there are some things you put in a box and keep on a shelf, not because you've moved on, but because moving on was never the point. The point was remembering. The point was making sure the world knew that someone had been here and that he mattered. I found out about the box that morning. The way I find out about most things that hurt too late to stop it, just in time to feel the full weight of it. I came into the kitchen around 7 to find Nora standing at the back door with both arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the trash cans near the garden. Her shoulders were shaking, not dramatically, not with sobs, just that small, terrible trembling that means something has gone past the point of composure. Nora. I crossed the kitchen fast. What happened? She turned around, and the look on her face hit me like a fist to the sternum. Her eyes were red, her lips pressed so tight they'd gone white at the corners. In her hand, she was holding a small photograph creased slightly, faded, the kind that had been handled so many times it had softened at the edges. She threw it out, Nora said. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, cracked and raw. Vanessa cleaned out the shelf above the refrigerator this morning. Said she needed the space for her kitchen things. A breath shuddered out of her. Cliff the box was up there. Eli's box. The room tilted. I took the photograph from her hands. A little boy, 9 years old, gap-toothed grin, standing on a dock with a fishing rod that was almost as tall as he was. His hair was wet. He was laughing at something outside the frame. My son. My youngest. Eli Marsh had been 9 years old on the last day of his life. It was a July afternoon 14 years ago on a lake 2 hours north of Grand Rapids, a family reunion, cousins everywhere, adults laughing on the shore. Nobody saw him go under. By the time anyone noticed, it was already too late. The paramedics worked on him for 17 minutes on the grass beside the water. Nora held my hand so hard that afternoon that she left marks on my palm. I didn't feel them until the next day. We buried him on a Friday. I went back to work the following Monday because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Nora didn't go near open water for 6 years after that. Not a lake, not a river, not even the ocean on a family trip Derek had suggested one summer. She couldn't. The sound of water moving had become the sound of something being taken. The house on Torch Lake was the first time she'd chosen to live beside it again. We'd talked about it for 3 years before I finally pulled the trigger on the purchase. She'd said, "I think I'm ready. I think being near it again might finally let me stop being afraid of it." I'd signed the papers the same week, and now Vanessa had thrown Eli's memory box in the trash because she needed shelf space for her stand mixer and her imported olive oil. I set the photograph down on the counter very carefully. Then I walked out the back door around the side of the house and lifted the lid of the trash can. The box was there. Small cedar wood, the kind you get at a craft store. Inside the photograph, a folded drawing Eli had made in 2nd grade of our old house. A friendship bracelet he'd gotten at camp the summer before he died, and a small, smooth stone from the shore of the lake where we lost him. Things that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know him. Things that meant everything to us. I carried the box back inside. Vanessa was at the kitchen island scrolling on her phone, a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside her. She glanced up when I came through the door. "Oh, that old box," she said, completely unbothered, like we were discussing a misplaced spatula. "I figured it was junk you hadn't gotten around to clearing out. I needed that shelf for Chew. This belonged to my son," I said. The words came out quiet. Quieter than I expected. My hands were steady around the box, but my jaw was so tight it ached. Vanessa blinked. "Derek's stuff, I can make room for it in the—" "My other son," I said. "The one who died." Something shifted in her expression, not guilt, not quite. More like the minor recalculation of someone who has stepped on something unexpected and is deciding whether to apologize or just step around it. "I didn't know," she said. "Now you do." I held her gaze for a long second. "Don't touch our things again, Vanessa. Not a shelf, not a box, not a photograph. Nothing. She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked back down at her phone. I took the box upstairs and put it on the shelf in our small room downstairs, the room that used to be a study, that was now the only space in this house that still felt like ours. I set it down gently the way you put something fragile in the only safe place left. Then I went out to the dock. The lake was still that morning. Not a ripple. I sat down at the end of the dock and looked out at the water and let myself feel the full weight of what was happening in that house behind me. "She threw your box in the trash, buddy," I said. My throat burned. My eyes went hot and I didn't bother trying to stop it. She didn't even know what it was. I sat out there for a long time. The water stayed still. The sun moved. Somewhere behind me, through the open window, I could hear Tara laughing at something on her phone. When I finally stood up and turned back toward the house, something had hardened in my chest. Not hatred. I'm too old and too tired for hatred. But a resolution. Cold and final the way metal gets when it sets. No more waiting. No more being polite about things that weren't polite. I walked back inside and picked up my phone. I didn't know exactly who I was going to call yet, but I knew I was going to call someone. I just didn't know it would already be too late to stop what Derek had been building not for weeks, but for years. The filing cabinet in my study had a 4-digit combination lock. I'd set the code myself the week we moved in. The last 4 digits of the phone number at the first house Nora and I ever owned together. Nobody knew that number. Nobody living anyway. So when I came downstairs that Tuesday morning and found the cabinet drawer sitting open 2 inches, my blood ran cold before my feet even crossed the threshold. I stood in the doorway of the study and looked at that drawer. Then I walked to it slowly the way you approach something you're not sure is still safe. The folders inside had been gone through, not ransacked, but shifted. Someone careful. Someone who didn't want me to notice. But I noticed. I checked the most important folder first, the house purchase documents, the deed, the original title paperwork. All still there. But they'd been moved. Reordered. The deed that I always kept on top was now 3rd from the front. My jaw clenched so hard my back teeth ached. I closed the drawer. Reset the combination to something new. Then I went to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't taste, and stood at the window staring out at the side yard until I heard movement on the other side of the fence. That was the first morning I really talked to Gus Calloway. Gus was 74 years old, built like a man who had spent decades not taking any nonsense from anyone, and he'd been our neighbor since the day we moved in. Retired Antrim County Sheriff's deputy, 26 years on the job before his knees gave out. He walked every morning at 7 along the fence line, same route, same pace, and he had the kind of eyes that had seen enough of the world to read a situation before anyone said a word. I went out to the garden with my coffee mug, and when he came around the corner of his yard, he took one look at my face and stopped walking. "Rough morning," he said. "Someone went through my filing cabinet," I said. "The one with the lock." Gus was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then he said, "Come here," and walked to the fence. He crossed his arms on the top rail and looked at me straight. "Cliff, I've been watching what's going on over at your place for the past 3 weeks. I wasn't going to say anything because it's not my business. But I'm going to say something now." "Say it," I said. "You know what implied tenancy is?" I shook my head. "It's when someone moves into a property with the owner's permission, even just a verbal okay, and starts acting like a resident. Paying utilities, receiving mail, establishing a pattern of living there." He tapped the fence rail. "At a certain point, Michigan law recognizes them as having residency rights even without a lease. Not ownership, but the right not to be removed without formal legal process." My stomach dropped. They've been here 3 weeks, and they changed your locks, and they're receiving packages at your address. I've seen the delivery trucks." He held my gaze. "I'm not saying they've got a legal claim yet. I'm saying they're building toward one, deliberately." The coffee mug in my hand felt suddenly very heavy. "You think Derek planned this?" Gus didn't flinch. "I think a man who shows up with a full moving truck for a few weeks, stay and changes the locks inside of 7 days isn't improvising," he said. "That's all I'm saying." I went back inside and found Derek in the kitchen eating toast and reading something on his phone like it was any ordinary morning. I set my mug down on the counter. "Derek," I said, "someone went through my filing cabinet." He looked up. His expression arranged itself into something that managed to look genuinely puzzled. "What do you mean, like things were moved around?" "The lock was opened and the files were gone through." He set his phone down and rubbed his jaw. "Dad, Vanessa was doing a deep clean of the study yesterday. She might have accidentally—" "The cabinet has a combination lock," I said. "A combination that I never shared with anyone." Something moved across Derek's face. Fast. Gone before I could name it. Then the easy, reasonable expression was back smooth as paint. "I honestly don't know, Dad. Maybe the lock wasn't fully engaged and it just— I don't know. I'll talk to Vanessa." He picked his phone back up. I stood there looking at the back of his head and felt something I hadn't felt toward my own son in 42 years. Distrust. Cold, settled, undeniable distrust. It sat in my chest like a stone I hadn't put there and couldn't remove. That same afternoon, I was on the back porch when I heard Derek's voice drifting through the open kitchen window. Low, careful, the voice he used when he didn't want to be overheard. The property title. "No, she hasn't signed anything yet. I know, just give me a little more time." I pressed my back against the wall and held my breath. My heart was hammering. My hands had gone cold. He wasn't talking to Vanessa. He was talking to someone about my house, about Nora signing something, about a property title that wasn't his. I didn't move until I heard him walk away from the window. Then I stood there on my own back porch for a long time, staring at the lake, and tried to line up everything I thought I knew about my son against the voice I had just heard through that window. That night I lay in the downstairs room staring at the ceiling, and the question moved through me, slow and cold, signed what exactly? And why was my son asking a lawyer that question? I once watched a locomotive derail at 40 miles an hour. The engineer saw it coming, felt it in the tracks. 3 seconds before it happened, told me later he knew the exact moment the wheels lost the rail. But 3 seconds isn't enough time to stop 40 tons of steel. All you can do is brace. That Saturday afternoon felt exactly the same way. Vanessa had announced the party on a Wednesday. "Just a little housewarming," she'd said, breezing through the kitchen with her phone in one hand and a decorating catalog in the other. "Some friends, some food, a chance to show the place off a little." I had looked at her. "Show whose place off?" She smiled without missing a beat. "The lake house. It's such a beautiful space, Clifton. It'd be a shame not to share it." I looked at Nora across the kitchen. Nora looked back at me with those steady eyes of hers and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Not yet." I swallowed everything I wanted to say and went back to my coffee. By Saturday evening, there were 34 people in my home. Vanessa had strung fairy lights across the back porch. There were catered trays on the dining table, wine glasses on every flat surface, and a Bluetooth speaker playing something I'd never heard and didn't particularly want to. I stood near the hallway in a clean shirt, watching strangers walk through rooms I had paid for with 37 years of my life. Ruth Calloway, Gus's wife, a sharp-eyed woman of 71 who had spent 2 decades as a county court clerk, and missed nothing, found me near the bookshelf and pressed a glass of sparkling water into my hand. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, positioning herself so her back was to the room. "Last Tuesday I was out front trimming the hedges when Vanessa came over to introduce herself to the Hendersons down the block. She told them—" Ruth paused, choosing her words carefully. "She told them that she and Derek had moved into the lake house, that it was a family property being passed down." My grip tightened on the glass. She said that, word for word. Ruth's eyes were firm. I remember it exactly because I thought it was a strange way to phrase things. Not, "we're staying with his parents." Not, "we're helping out." She said it like the house was already hers. She touched my arm briefly. "I thought you should know." Before I could respond, Vanessa's voice rose from across the room, bright, carrying perfectly pitched for an audience. "My in-laws were so generous," she was telling a group of women near the fireplace. "They basically gave us this place so we'd have somewhere beautiful to build our life. We are just so incredibly blessed." The words landed in my chest, like something dropped from a height. I turned toward the sound. Vanessa was standing with her back to me, wine glass raised, smiling at a woman I didn't recognize. 3 feet to Vanessa's left stood Brooke Dalton, one of those women who wore wealth the way other people wore perfume, effortlessly and in every direction. 36 years old, designer everything, phone already raised to capture the room for her social media. She panned slowly across the back porch, the lake, the fairy lights, and I watched her mouth the words as she typed the caption. I took one step forward, then another, until I was standing directly behind Vanessa. She turned, and for one fraction of a second something flickered in her eyes. Then the smile was back wide and practiced. "Clifton, come meet everyone. This is Sarah and Jennifer, and you know Brooke." "I heard what you said," I told her, quietly, not aggressive, just honest and direct enough that the women around her went still. Vanessa tilted her head. "I was just telling them how generous you and Nora have been." "You told them we gave you this house," I said. "We didn't give you anything, Vanessa." The smile didn't leave her face, but it changed, thinned out, stretched a little too wide. "I just meant that you've been so welcoming." "I know what you meant," I said. There was a beat of uncomfortable silence. The woman named Sarah looked at her wine glass. Jennifer took a small step back. Brooke Dalton lowered her phone by about 3 inches, but didn't put it away. Derek appeared at my elbow from nowhere, smooth and fast, hand on my shoulder. "Dad, hey, can I grab you for a second? I want to show you something in the garage." "I'm fine right here," I said without turning. Derek's hand tightened on my shoulder, not hard, just present. A reminder. "Come on, Dad. Just a minute." I let him steer me toward the hallway because making a scene in front of 34 people wasn't the move. Not yet. Not without what I needed. In the hallway, Derek dropped the friendly act by about half. "Dad," he said, his voice low and tight. "This is important to Vanessa. Can you just let her have tonight? She told people we gave her our home. She was being casual. You know how she talks." "I know exactly how she talks," I said. "The question is whether you do." He stared at me. Something moved behind his eyes, not guilt exactly. More like the expression of a man recalculating how much I actually knew. "Just enjoy the party," he said finally, and walked back into the living room. I stayed in the hallway for a moment. Through the archway, I could see Nora sitting in the armchair by the window, back straight, hands folded in her lap, watching the room the way a woman watches something she has already decided to outlast. I went and stood beside her chair. She didn't look up at me, but she reached over and put her hand over mine where it rested on the armrest. "Ruth heard her telling the neighbors the house was already theirs," I said under my breath. "I know." Nora's voice was completely steady. Brooke Dalton just posted a video to her social media. She tagged the location. The caption says, "At Melissa's new lake house." She paused. She called her Melissa by accident, her real name, before the wedding. I looked at my wife. Her jaw was set. Her eyes had that banked fire quality, again controlled, deliberate, burning, slow. "Are you keeping track of all of this?" I asked. "Every single word," she said. "Every single post." That night after the guests left, and the fairy lights came down, and the catering trays were stacked by the door, I helped wash every glass in the kitchen. Because it was still my house, and I still knew how to take care of it. But for the first time I understood that taking care of it was going to mean something a lot harder than washing dishes. I used to think I was the sharp one in our marriage. 37 years, reading the warning signs on a locomotive, a vibration here, a pressure drop there, a sound that's 2 degrees off from what it should be, had made me believe I was the one who caught things early, the one who saw trouble before it arrived. 43 years of marriage, and I still hadn't learned. It happened the afternoon Tara walked into the small room off the hallway, the room where Nora kept Eli's photographs. His drawings, the things she couldn't display openly anymore, but couldn't bear to pack away either. Tara had her phone up, ring light clipped to the doorframe, and she was talking to her camera in that bright, empty way she had. "Okay, so this little nook is actually super cute, you guys. Like, it's got this whole nostalgic vibe going on, really works for the aesthetic." I heard it from the kitchen. I was through that hallway in 4 seconds flat. "Tara," my voice came out harder than I planned. "Get out of that room." She turned, startled, phone still raised. "I was just out." I pointed at the hallway. "Right now. That room is not part of your space." She lowered the phone slowly, her expression cycling through surprise, and then something close to irritation. Okay. I didn't know it was like off limits. There wasn't a sign or anything." "There doesn't need to be a sign," I said. "It's not your home." She brushed past me into the hallway, muttering something I chose not to hear. I stood in the doorway of Eli's room for a moment. The photographs were still on the shelf. His second-grade drawing was still tacked to the small corkboard. The room was intact. But something had been violated anyway, some quiet boundary that didn't need words to be real, and my chest ached with the effort of not putting my fist through the nearest wall. That night after dinner, Nora told me to sit down. We were in the small downstairs room, the only room in the house that still felt entirely ours. She sat across from me on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, and the look on her face was the one she wore when she had already made a decision and was now informing me of it. "I called Owen Parrish 6 weeks ago," she said. I stared at her. "You what?" "6 weeks ago, the week Derek arrived." She held my gaze without flinching. "I called Owen and told him what was happening. He's been reviewing the trust documents and the deed ever since." "Nora." My voice came out rough, scraped, raw. 6 weeks. You've known for 6 weeks, and you didn't tell me." "Because you would have gone straight to Derek that same day," she said, and her voice was firm and clear, not apologetic. "You would have confronted him before we had a single piece of paper in our hands. And then he would have backed off just enough to make us look like the unreasonable ones, and we'd have lost every advantage we had." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You should have told me. I'm telling you now." She reached over to the nightstand and picked up a folded document. She held it out to me. "I signed this yesterday at Owen's office. It's a durable power of attorney. It gives you full legal authority to act on my behalf in any dispute involving this property, to work with attorneys, law enforcement, the courts. Everything." I took the document from her hands. The paper was crisp official, notarized at the bottom. Her signature was there in her careful, even script. My throat went tight. My eyes burned around the edges. "The house is in my name," Nora continued. "But you need to understand something, Cliff. Owen reminded me of what you set up when we bought the place. The revocable living trust. Remember, you put the house into a trust with both of us as co-trustees before we ever signed the deed." I nodded slowly, the memory coming back. That means even though my name is on the deed, neither of us can make a major decision about this property alone," she said. "Sell it, mortgage it, transfer it, any of that requires both of us. Derek doesn't know that trust exists. He thinks if he can get me to sign one piece of paper, the house is his." Her jaw tightened. He is wrong. I looked down at the POA document in my hands. My fingers were trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the particular feeling of having been carrying something alone and suddenly realizing someone else had been carrying it with you the whole time. "Idea, Nora," I said. My voice came out uneven. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I stopped, pressed the back of my hand against my mouth for a second. "I've been lying awake every night thinking I was watching this happen and couldn't stop it." She leaned forward and put both her hands over mine. Her grip was strong. "I know," she said, and for the first time her voice cracked just slightly at the edges. "I know you have, and I'm sorry for that part. I genuinely am. But Cliff, I needed you steady. I needed you to keep doing exactly what you were doing, acting like you didn't know the full picture, because Derek was watching you for a reaction. The moment you reacted, we'd lose the element of surprise." I looked at her, this woman I had been married to for 43 years, who had stood at a graveside with me and stayed upright when I wasn't sure either of us would, who had signed her name to a house on a lake because I thought it would protect her, and had quietly, methodically turned that vulnerability into a weapon. "You're something else," I said. The corner of her mouth curved up. "I know," I almost laughed. The pressure in my chest released by a fraction, not gone, but shifted into something more manageable. "Owen's ready?" I asked. "He's been ready," she said. "He told me to tell you, and I'm quoting directly, 'I've been waiting for your call, Cliff. I figured Nora would bring you around eventually.'" That did make me laugh. Short, surprised, genuine. I folded the document carefully and held it against my chest for a moment. Outside the window, the lake was dark and flat. Somewhere upstairs, Tara's voice drifted through the floor, still talking, always talking. I picked up my phone and dialed Owen Parrish's number. He picked up on the first ring. Owen Parrish doesn't waste words. In 30 years of knowing him, I have never heard the man say anything he didn't mean, and I have never heard him exaggerate. He's the kind of attorney who speaks in facts the way a carpenter speaks in measurements, precise, load-bearing, not decorative. So when he called me that Tuesday morning and opened with, "Cliff, this is worse than I thought," I sat down on the porch step and didn't say anything for a full 3 seconds. "How much worse?" I asked. "Pull up a chair," he said. "This is going to take a minute." Owen had spent the past 6 weeks pulling every public record he could find attached to Derek's name in Michigan. UCC filings, that's the Uniform Commercial Code, the public database where lenders record financial claims against borrowers and their assets. What he found made my stomach turn over like a bad engine. Derek applied for a business loan in March, Owen said. $180,000 from a private lending group out of Grand Rapids. In the loan application, under assets held as collateral, he listed the Torch Lake property. My hand gripped the porch railing. The wood was rough under my palm. He listed our house, your house, which is not his house. Owen's voice stayed even, He listed the address, provided a property valuation, and indicated in the supporting documents that the title would be transferred to his name within 60 days of the loan approval. 60 days. The loan had been approved in April. We had moved in June. He planned the whole move before we even had the keys, I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper. It appears that way, Owen said. There's a second filing, a smaller personal line of credit also from spring of this year, also listing the property. Total exposure is somewhere in the range of $380,000. He paused. Cliff, if those lenders call in those loans and Derek can't pay, he needs that house to be in his name. Or at minimum, he needs to be able to demonstrate control over it. The morning air felt suddenly very thin. I pressed my free hand flat against my sternum, feeling my own heartbeat fast, hard, too loud. He needs Nora to sign, I said. That's what he needs. Owen confirmed. The property management authorization Vanessa's been pushing, I've seen a copy. It's drafted to look routine, but buried in the language is a clause that grants Derek power of attorney over all financial decisions related to the property. If Nora signs it, he effectively controls the house. But the trust protects you, Owen said firmly. Nora can't unilaterally authorize anything that significant without your co-signature as co-trustee. Even if she signed that authorization tomorrow, it wouldn't hold up. But here's the problem: Derek doesn't know the trust exists. He's been operating under the assumption that Nora is the sole decision-maker. If she signs and he tries to move on, we end up in litigation. Expensive, slow, ugly litigation. So we stop it before she signs, I said. We already have, Owen said. Nora has the POA in your hands. She's been instructed not to sign anything without you present. But I want more than a legal defense, Cliff. I want a case. Documentation witnesses a paper trail that makes what Derek is doing undeniable. He took a breath. I need you to start collecting evidence. Written, recorded, time-stamped. Everything. After I hung up, I sat on that porch step for a long time. The lake was out there in the morning sun, flat and brilliant, completely indifferent to what was happening in the house behind me. My chest was so tight it hurt to breathe through. Not from grief this time, from the particular nauseating pain of understanding exactly what had been done. My son had planned this before I signed the mortgage, before I loaded the moving truck, before Nora pressed her hands against that railing and said it was exactly how she'd pictured it. He'd been building this for months while I thought he was just getting his life together. I stood up, went inside, and ordered 4 small security cameras from my phone. Discreet, high resolution with cloud backup. Legal in every room I planned to put them: the front hallway, the kitchen, the living room, the back entry. All common areas. All mine by right. They arrived the next afternoon. I installed them myself. 37 years working with precision equipment meant I knew my way around a wire and a mounting bracket. I set them up in 40 minutes while Vanessa was at a yoga class and Tara was driving Derek somewhere I didn't ask about. The cloud backup activated automatically, everything time-stamped. That evening, Derek came home with a man I'd never seen, mid-40s, expensive jacket, the careful grooming of someone who handled other people's money. Derek was talking as they came through the front door, one hand gesturing broadly at the vaulted ceiling, the other clapping the man on the shoulder. The family property. Derek was saying, his voice warm and confident. Solid foundation, great location, appreciating value. It's the kind of asset that anchors everything else. The man looked around the living room, nodding. His eyes moved over the furniture, the windows, the view of the lake. Evaluating. I was standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in my hand. Derek glanced over and saw me. His step hitched just barely, just for a fraction of a second. Then the smile was back, easy and wide. Dad, hey, this is a colleague of mine just stopping by to see the place. Hope that's okay. It's your father's house, the man said pleasantly, extending a hand toward me. Beautiful property. It is, I said, and I shook his hand. My wife's name is on the deed. A small silence. The man glanced at Derek. Derek laughed a little too quickly, a little too loud. Dad keeps it in Mom's name for estate planning purposes. You know how it is. Sure, the man said, but something in his expression had shifted. A small recalculation. I went back to the kitchen and finished washing the dishes. Through the archway, I could hear Derek's voice picking back up, smoother now, faster, filling in the gap I'd just opened. The camera on the kitchen shelf was recording all of it. That night, I lay in the downstairs room and thought about the boy Derek used to be. The one who used to fall asleep against the truck window on the way home from my night shifts, mouth half open, baseball cap crooked, completely at peace. I used to carry him inside on those nights. He was so trusting in his sleep, so easy to hold. I thought I knew my son. I had been reading the wrong story all along. There is a moment in every serious situation when you stop calling it a misunderstanding. When the evidence stops being circumstantial and becomes a pattern so deliberate, so calculated, that the only honest word left for it is a choice. Someone made a choice. A cold, unhurried, premeditated choice. And they made it while sitting at your kitchen table, drinking your coffee, wearing a smile that had been rehearsed until it looked effortless. That moment came for me on a Thursday morning at the end of August. I was out back pulling weeds along the fence line. The kind of slow, mindless work that clears your head when I glanced through the kitchen window and stopped cold. Vanessa was sitting across the table from Nora. Too close. Leaning forward with her elbows on the wood, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, radiating the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed this particular conversation more than once. There was a folder on the table between them. Thin manila, nothing alarming from the outside. Nora was reading what was inside. My hands went completely still in the dirt. My chest squeezed so hard I had to remind myself to breathe. I straightened up, slowly wiped my hands down the front of my jeans, and moved toward the back door without making a sound. By the time I stepped through the screen door, Vanessa was already talking. It's completely standard, she was saying, her voice smooth and warm and rehearsed. Every property owner with family members involved eventually needs something like this on file. It just means that if there's ever a repair, a utility issue, anything administrative, Derek can handle it without you having to go through the whole process yourself. It takes the burden off you, Nora. That's all it is. Nora. I said her name once. From the doorway. Quiet and flat. Both women looked up. Vanessa's expression held just a fraction too composed, the kind of stillness that takes practice to maintain under pressure. But Nora's eyes found mine immediately, and what I saw in them stopped me mid-step. She had already read every page. She already knew exactly what that folder was, and she had been sitting there keeping her face neutral, waiting for me to walk through the door. Vanessa was showing me some paperwork, Nora said. Her voice was perfectly measured. A property management form, she called it. I heard. I crossed the kitchen, pulled out the chair beside Nora, and sat down. I extended my hand toward the folder. May I see it? Vanessa slid it across the table without hesitation, which told me she had already decided that confidence was her best cover. I read it. All 3 pages. Dense with legal language written to look routine to someone who wasn't hunting for the buried clause. I found it on page 2, tucked inside the 3rd paragraph, between a section about maintenance authorization and another about utility accounts, language designed to disappear unless you were specifically looking for it. The undersigned hereby grants full authority to Derek James Marsh, to act as financial representative in all matters pertaining to the management, encumbrance, or disposition of the above-referenced property. Encumbrance, disposition. Those were not maintenance words. Those were ownership words. I set the folder down on the table and smoothed the top page with my palm. The muscles along my jaw were working. My neck felt like a cable pulled 2 notches too tight. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice level and even, "This is not a property management form." She blinked at me, wide-eyed, open, genuinely puzzled-looking. "It's completely standard. It grants Derek financial authority over the disposition of this property," I said. "That means he could use this document to leverage the house against a debt, to authorize a sale, to initiate a transfer of title. This is not about utility accounts." I set 2 fingers on the folder. "This is a document designed to hand your husband legal control over a home that belongs to my wife. I want you to be clear that I understand exactly what it says." Vanessa's chin lifted. The warmth in her expression dropped away like a coat sliding off a shoulder. "I think you're reading too much into the wording, Clifton. I think I said, you should leave this room." She stared at me for a long beat, her jaw tight, her fingers white around the coffee mug. Then she stood up, straightened her blouse with 2 sharp tugs, and walked toward the doorway. She stopped at the threshold and turned back, and when she spoke, her voice had gone flat and precise, all the warmth stripped clean out of it. "We are just trying to make things easier for everyone in this family. I don't understand why you insist on making it so difficult." She walked out. Nora's hand came down on my forearm the moment Vanessa's footsteps faded down the hall. Her fingers pressed in, hard, not comforting, gripping, and her voice dropped low and fierce. "I wasn't going to sign it. I want you to know that. Owen told me months ago nothing gets signed without you in the room. I was reading it slowly to buy time until you came inside." "I know," I said. I turned my hand over and held hers. "I know exactly what you were doing." She exhaled a long, shaky breath, like something she had been holding in for 30 minutes, finally leaving her body. Her eyes were wet at the corners, but her jaw was set hard. "How long has she been planning this?" "Long enough to write a 3-page document with a buried clause," I said. "Long enough to rehearse the conversation." That night, after the house went quiet, and I could hear Derek and Vanessa moving around upstairs, I sat down in front of my laptop and opened the camera footage from the past 72 hours. I went through it the same way I used to review incident reports on the railroad, frame by frame, methodical, looking for the thing that didn't fit. I found it 23 minutes into Wednesday's kitchen recording. Vanessa was standing at the counter with her back to the camera phone pressed to her ear, voice low. She thought she was alone. The microphone was good quality, Owen had insisted on that, and every word came through clean and cold. "The old man's not going to last much longer anyway. Once she signs, it's a done deal. Derek just needs to stop second-guessing himself and push harder." My blood went ice cold. I sat back in my chair and let those words settle through me, not fast, not in a wave, but slowly, like cold water rising from the floor. The old man. That was me. The man who had worked 37 winters on the railroad so his son could go to college without a loan. The man who had not left Derek's hospital bedside for 4 straight days when he was 7 years old with pneumonia. The old man who won't last much longer. I saved the file to 3 separate locations. Then I kept watching. 40 minutes later, I found the second clip. Derek and Vanessa in the kitchen at 11 at night, voices low, heads close together. Derek was the one talking, and he was specific, not agitated, not rushed, but careful and deliberate, like a man who had thought this through. When don't push her directly. Let her think she's making the decision herself. Start small, offer to handle a bill, ask to be copied on the utility accounts. Build the habit. Once she's comfortable letting us manage things, the authorization form is just the next natural step. She won't even hesitate. My chest cracked open down the middle. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't desperation. This was a blueprint drawn up in advance and executed over months. Every small intrusion, the lock, the cabinet, the folder, had been a step in a sequence that Derek had mapped out before they ever arrived with that moving truck. I called Owen at 10:30. He picked up on the second ring. Owen. My voice came out steadier than I expected, but my hand on the phone was shaking badly enough that I had to press it against my thigh. I have footage, audio and video, kitchen recordings, 2 separate clips, 2 separate nights, clear enough to use in court. A pause, the kind where a careful man is thinking before he speaks. Send everything to me tonight. All of it. Don't delete anything, don't edit anything, just send it exactly as it is. Then quieter, Cliff. Are you all right? I looked out the window at the lake. The water was black and flat, and still the way it always is when the wind dies completely. Not yet, I said. But I'm getting there. I saved everything to 3 separate locations, closed the laptop, and sat in the dark for a long time. The lake outside the window was black and perfectly still. I had enough. I finally had enough. Kids notice everything. They catalog it quietly, the way water collects in a low place, slowly, without announcement, until one day the ground is saturated and there's nowhere left for it to go. My grandson Milo was 14 that fall. Quiet kid. Tall for his age, with Derek's jawline and Nora's eyes, that careful, watchful quality that made you feel like he was always thinking 2 thoughts at once. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he meant it. Reminded me of myself at that age, which was either a comfort or a warning, depending on the day. He and his sister Lily arrived on a Friday afternoon in late September. Derek dropped them off for the weekend, said he had things to handle, drove away before I could finish saying hello. Lily was 10, all energy and sunshine, and she hit the back lawn, running arms out like she was trying to catch the lake breeze. She found Nora in the garden and immediately started asking questions about which flowers were which, her voice carrying across the yard in bright, happy waves. Milo stood on the porch with his overnight bag and watched his sister run. And something in his expression was older than 14 had any right to be. "Hey, Grandpa," he said. "Hey, bud." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You hungry?" "Not really." "Come on anyway, Otson," I said. "Your grandmother made enough food for a small army and she'll take it personally if we don't make a dent." That got a small smile out of him. We went inside. Dinner was the 4 of us at the kitchen table. Nora had made pot roast, and there was cornbread, and Lily talked enough for all of us, describing her new teacher and a soccer game and a girl in her class named after a flower. Nora laughed at the right moments and refilled everyone's water, and the kitchen felt for about an hour like the house it was supposed to be. Milo ate steadily and said little, but I noticed he watched his grandfather's face more than he watched his plate. After dinner, while Lily helped Nora clear the table and narrated the entire process in real time, Milo followed me out to the back dock. The lake was going gold in the late light. We sat on the edge with our feet over the water, and I handed him a root beer from the cooler I kept out there. He turned the can in his hands without opening it. "Grandpa," he said finally, "is Dad in some kind of trouble?" I looked at him sideways. "What makes you ask that?" He set the can down on the dock beside him. "I heard him on the phone a few weeks ago, at home. He was talking about debts and something about a property, and he said—" Milo stopped, pressed his lips together. He said Mom doesn't know the full situation yet, and then he said something about you and Grandma's house. My stomach pulled tight. I kept my face neutral. What did he say about the house? He said once Grandma signed something, it would all be settled. Milo looked at me directly, and the honesty in his eyes was the kind that costs something. Grandpa, are they trying to take your house? I held his gaze for a long moment. This boy who had his grandmother's eyes and his grandfather's tendency to ask the question everyone else was walking around. I thought about what to say, how much truth a 14-year-old could carry, and how much it would cost him to carry it. I'm handling it, I said carefully. You don't need to worry about it, Milo. His jaw tightened. That means yes. It means I'm handling it, I said again firmer. And it means you did the right thing telling me. He picked up his root beer, finally opened it, and took a long drink. His hands weren't quite steady. I don't want to get Dad in trouble, he said. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, 14 years old, trying not to sound like he was about to cry and not quite managing it. My chest pulled apart at the seams. Hey. I put my hand on the back of his neck the way I used to when he was small. Whatever happens between me and your dad, that is not your burden. You understand me? You are not responsible for his choices. Milo nodded once, fast, blinking hard. He stared out at the water. We sat there together until the sun finished going down. The next morning was when it happened. Tara was set up in the living room, doing one of her weekend live streams. She'd been at it since 9, bright and relentless, walking her viewers through what she called Lake House Weekend Energy. Lily had wandered in and was sitting on the couch behind her coloring, barely visible in frame. Milo was upstairs, but his phone was connected to the house Wi-Fi, and he'd pulled up Tara's stream the way teenagers do, half watching one earbud and scrolling through comments. Derek came through the living room at around 10:30, phone pressed to his ear, not paying attention to the camera. Not paying attention to anything the way a man moves through a space he considers entirely his own. He walked past the camera, and his voice came through clear as a bell. Just need Mom to sign the authorization. Once that's done, the house is settled, and I can pay down the loan. Tell them another 2 weeks, 3 at the outside. Tara didn't react. She was mid-sentence about throw pillows. Lily kept coloring, but upstairs Milo had both earbuds in now. He was leaning over his phone, face tight, rewinding the clip. He played it again, and again. He came downstairs 20 minutes later and found me in the study. He knocked on the open door, stepped inside, and held his phone out to me without saying a word. The clip was already queued up. I watched it. 14 seconds. Derek's voice, the living room background, Tara's cheerful narration floating underneath. Crystal clear. I looked up at Milo. His face was pale and set and trying very hard not to show how much this cost him. Thank you, I said. My voice was rough around the edges. Milo, this took real courage. His throat moved. Is it enough? He asked. To help you? It helps, I said. Yes. He stood in the doorway for another moment. Then, Grandpa, I'm sorry about my dad. 8 words. 14 years old. Standing in a study full of evidence against his own father, apologizing for a man he didn't raise and couldn't fix. I stood up and put both hands on his shoulders and looked at him straight. Don't you dare carry that, I told him. That is not yours. He nodded. His eyes were bright with tears he was refusing to let fall. He turned and walked back down the hallway, and I heard him go up the stairs, and I heard his door close. I sat back down at my desk. I saved the video Milo had sent me to 4 separate locations. Then I added it to the folder Owen had been building for 2 months. The folder was very heavy now. I've never been a man who keeps score. I was raised to believe that doing right by someone is its own reward. You don't catalog your good deeds and present them later like receipts. You do what needs doing and you move on. That's the way my father lived, and his father before him, and it's the way I tried to live too. But standing in my own kitchen that October morning, listening to my daughter-in-law tell me I might not be mentally fit to manage my own affairs, I thought about Raymond Cole for the first time in years. It started before breakfast. Vanessa came downstairs dressed for somewhere, keys already in hand, and she stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at me with an expression I'd never quite seen on her face before. Not the practiced warmth, not the performative smile. This was something stripped back, calculating. "I need to say something to you," she said, "and I need you to hear it as coming from a place of genuine concern." I set my coffee mug down. "Go ahead. Derek and I have been talking." She crossed her arms, weight shifting to one hip. "About the situation here, about how things have been going, and we're worried about you, Clifton, about your health, your memory, the way you've been reacting to things." My hands went very still on the counter. "Reacting to things," I repeated. "The overreactions, the suspicion." She tilted her head, voice softening into something that was supposed to sound caring, but landed about 3 degrees too rehearsed. "Derek thinks it might be worth having a doctor do an evaluation, just to make sure everything is okay, for your own protection." The air in that kitchen went tight as a drum. I looked at this woman, 38 years old, standing in my kitchen, in my house with my coffee still warm on the counter, and I felt something move through me that was not anger. It was colder than anger, more clarifying. "Hi, Vanessa," I said, and my voice came out so level it surprised even me. "I built 2 houses from the foundation up before you were born. I managed a 16-person maintenance crew on a Class 1 railroad for 19 years without a single serious incident on my watch. I raised a son, buried another one, and I have been married to the same woman for 43 years. I picked up my mug. I am not confused. I am paying attention. There is a difference." Her jaw tightened. "All I'm saying is, and if you try to restrict my access to my grandchildren," I said, cutting straight through it, "I want you to understand that every action has a legal consequence. Owen Parrish is already fully briefed." The color shifted in her face. She hadn't expected me to know the name. She hadn't expected me to be that far ahead. She left without finishing her sentence, and the back door swung shut behind her hard enough to rattle the window above the sink. I stood at the counter for a long moment, breathing through it. My pulse was running fast and hot, my chest tight, with something between fury and grief. I pressed both palms flat on the counter and looked at the grain of the wood and waited until my hands stopped trembling. Then I thought about Raymond Cole. Vanessa's father had been a contractor out of Lansing, a decent enough man who'd hit a brutal stretch in 2009 when the construction market collapsed and took his business with it. $340,000 in debt 2 months from bankruptcy, and a family that was going to lose everything. I had heard about his situation through a mutual acquaintance at the railroad, the kind of thing that moves through small professional circles without anyone meaning to spread it. I hadn't known the Cole family well at the time. Derek had only been dating Vanessa for a year. But I knew a man in community lending, and I made a call. I explained the situation, vouched for Raymond's character as best I could, and helped structure a debt consolidation arrangement that gave him time to recover. Raymond Cole never knew who had set that in motion. I had asked that it be handled quietly. Vanessa had grown up in a house that my phone call had helped save. I didn't think about that often. I genuinely didn't. But standing in my kitchen after she'd just suggested I might be losing my mind, I felt the weight of it in a way I hadn't before. Not bitterness, I want to be clear about that. More like the particular sadness of understanding that grace doesn't create obligation. It never did. You give it freely, or you don't give it at all. Owen called that afternoon, and his voice had an edge I recognized. I need you to hear this directly, he said. Derek made inquiries last week with a medical group in Traverse City. He asked about the process for cognitive decline assessments on elderly patients, specifically whether a family member could initiate one. The room tilted. He's going to try to have me declared incompetent, I said. My voice came out flat. Not surprised, just flat the way you sound, when something you feared confirms itself. He's going to try, Owen said. He won't succeed. I've already spoken to your physician, Dr. Harmon. He is fully prepared to provide a comprehensive statement of your cognitive and physical health, everything clean, everything documented. If Derek files for guardianship, he will walk into a courtroom against a man with 37 years of professional records, a clean medical history, and a very prepared attorney. A pause. But Cliff, I need you to do something for me tonight. What? Go find Derek, Owen said. Don't accuse him of anything. Don't lay out what you know. Just look him in the eye and let him know you see him. Sometimes that's enough to slow a man down. I found Derek in the study that evening on his laptop. I knocked once on the open door. He looked up. Got a minute? I asked. Sure. He closed the laptop, leaned back. The picture of ease. I stepped inside, stayed near the door. I looked at my son, 42 years old, his mother's cheekbones, my father's hands, and I said it straight. Derek, whatever you think you're doing, I want you to know I see it. All of it. Every piece of it. He held my gaze. A muscle in his jaw moved once. His eyes shifted not away but inward, recalculating. The ease in his posture didn't disappear exactly, but it thinned. I don't know what you mean, Dad, he said. Yes, you do, I said, and I walked out. That night I sat on the dock alone for a long time. The lake was cold and black and perfectly still. I thought about the boy Derek had been the one who used to cry at sad movies and pretend he hadn't, who had held my hand at Eli's funeral without being asked. I thought about where that boy went and when, and I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure there was one. But I knew what the man in front of me was trying to take, and I was done letting him try. A railroad engineer learns one thing above everything else, and it took me 37 years on the line to learn it properly. You don't stop a runaway train by standing in front of it. You don't argue with 40 tons of steel moving at full speed. You don't plant your feet and raise your hand and expect it to care. What you do if you're smart, if you're patient, if you've done this long enough to know how momentum works, is change the tracks ahead of it. Quietly, carefully, before it gets there. And then you step aside and let it run itself directly into the place you've already prepared. I had spent 4 months standing in front of that train. I was done with that. Owen's office was on the second floor of a building in Elk Rapids, 12 miles north of the lake house. A clean, no-nonsense space with a window overlooking the marina and walls lined floor to ceiling with organized filing systems that told you, without a single word, exactly what kind of man you were dealing with. The kind who didn't misplace things. The kind who didn't forget. He had everything laid out across the conference table by the time I arrived. Camera footage logs printed and time-stamped, audio transcripts with relevant passages underlined in red, printed records of Derek's loan filings pulled directly from the Antrim County Register of Deeds, Brooke Dalton's social media posts screenshot and archived before she deleted them, Ruth Calloway's signed written statement about what Vanessa had told the neighbors at the first housewarming, and the 14-second video Milo had captured and sent transferred to a flash drive and logged as evidence. I sat down across from Owen and looked at all of it spread out in front of me, the full weight of 4 months sitting on a table. "Tell me where we stand," I said. Owen folded his hands together on the table. 63 years old, gray at both temples, with the kind of bone-deep calm that only comes from spending decades watching people make catastrophic decisions and knowing from the very first conversation exactly how those decisions were going to end. "You have documented evidence of fraudulent loan applications that used this property as collateral without the legal consent of either co-trustee," he said, his voice measured and deliberate. "You have recorded audio evidence of a conspiracy to obtain a fraudulent power of attorney over your wife's property interest. You have signed third-party witness testimony establishing a pattern of deliberate misrepresentation to neighbors and guests." He tapped the edge of the table with 2 fingers. "And you have a revocable living trust that renders every single one of Derek's plans legally impossible, has rendered them impossible from the very beginning. He has been building on a foundation that doesn't exist. He just doesn't know it yet." "Good," I said. "Let's keep it that way until we're ready." Owen nodded slowly. "There are 2 more documents I want to finalize today. Both are important." The first was the trust for Milo and Lily. Owen had drafted it with careful precision. Nora and I listed as grantors, Milo and Lily named as sole beneficiaries, Owen himself designated as successor trustee to eliminate any conflict of interest. The children would receive their designated shares of the estate at age 25. With one standing provision built into the core of the document, the Torch Lake property could not be sold, mortgaged, encumbered, or transferred out of family ownership without the written consent of both beneficiaries once they reached legal age. The clause was ironclad. Derek's name appeared nowhere in the document. Not once. I signed it without hesitation, picked up the pen, and signed before Owen had even finished explaining the last clause because there was nothing to think about. Nora was beside me, her reading glasses on her pen moving across the signature line in that careful, deliberate hand she's had since I first watched her sign our marriage certificate 43 years ago. Her wrist was steady. Her breathing was steady. But when she set the pen down, she pressed her lips together hard and looked straight ahead for a moment, and I knew what that expression cost her. The second document was the updated will. "Derek is removed as a direct beneficiary," Owen said. He kept his voice neutral and professional, the way a doctor delivers a diagnosis, factual without cruelty, without softening it past the point of honesty. "Everything flows to Nora as primary beneficiary, then directly to the trust established for the children. He receives nothing from your estate as a direct inheritance." Nora looked at the will for a long time without speaking. Her face was composed remarkably so, but I could see the small muscle working in her jaw, the one that tightens when she's carrying something. She's decided not to say out loud, because saying it would make her cry, and she had decided she was not going to cry in Owen's conference room. I reached over and put my hand over hers on the table. "Is this what you want?" I asked her. I kept my voice low just for her. She turned and looked at me fully. Her eyes were dry, but the rims had gone red at the edges. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and absolutely certain. "He made this decision, Cliff," she said. "Every step of it, the loan, the document, the plan he laid out in our own kitchen while we were sleeping down the hall. He made every single one of those choices with a clear head." She looked back down at the will. "We didn't take anything from him. We're just responding to what he already decided." She picked up the pen. Her hand was perfectly steady. "That's all this is." She signed. I signed. Owen collected both documents, organized them into a binder with the quiet efficiency of a man who had shepherded difficult situations through difficult moments for 30 years, and placed it in the center of the table between us. "This is enough," he said. He said it plainly, without drama, the way you'd confirm a measurement. "This is more than enough to establish fraudulent intent, conspiracy, and misrepresentation. Everything we need is documented, time-stamped, and sourced. We are ready." I looked at that binder. 4 months of patience sitting in a 2-inch thick stack of paper. 4 months of waking up before dawn and lying still and listening to someone else's noise filling a house I had built my life to afford. 40 years of working a railroad reduced to evidence against my own son. My throat pulled tight enough that I had to take a slow breath before I trusted myself to speak. "Then we wait for the right moment," I said. On the drive home, I pulled over at the stretch of fence where Gus Calloway does his afternoon walk along the property line. He came over when he saw the truck, both hands deep in his jacket pockets, and looked at my face the way a man reads the sky before deciding whether to cover his woodpile. "You look like a man who just signed some serious paperwork," he said. "I did," I said. He studied me for another moment. "You ready for what comes next?" "I have been ready," I said, "since the day they changed the locks on my front door." He held my eyes for a solid 3 seconds, then gave me one short nod, the nod of a man who had been waiting to see whether I had enough in me to see this through. "Ruth and I will be available," he said. "Whatever night it is. Whatever you need from us." "I know," I said. "That means more than you know, Gus." I drove home. Made a simple dinner pot roast, the kind Nora likes when the weather starts cooling. We sat at the kitchen table together and let the evening settle around us without rushing it. For the first time in 4 months, the meal felt like ours again. Vanessa came downstairs around 8 o'clock, moving through the kitchen with the breezy, unhurried confidence of a woman who had no idea the ground had already been removed from beneath her feet. She poured herself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and announced with a smile that filled the room like a draft that she was planning a proper housewarming party. "A real one this time," she said, "with the right people." "That sounds lovely," I said. I kept my voice warm and easy. She smiled wider, satisfied, and went back upstairs. I waited, counted her footsteps, heard the bedroom door close on the floor above. Then I looked across the table at Nora. She was already looking back at me, her chin slightly raised, her eyes sharp and steady. "Call Owen," she said. Just those 2 words. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Owen," I said when he answered on the second ring. She just set the date. Before I reveal what happened the night of that party, the moment everything finally broke open, I want to hear from you. Do you think Clifton had enough to win? Comment yes if you think he was ready, or not yet if you think there was still something missing. Let me know you're here. A gentle heads up, the story ahead includes some fictional elements woven in for dramatic effect. If you'd rather step away before the final confrontation, now's your moment, no hard feelings. The party started at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening in the first week of November, and by 8:30, there were 43 people standing inside my house. I know the exact number because I counted them. Twice. Old habit from 37 years on the railroad, you account for every person in a confined space before something goes wrong, because after something goes wrong, it's already too late to start counting. I stood near the hallway entrance in a clean button-down shirt with a glass of water in my hand, and I tracked every single guest who came through my front door. I knew their names when I could. When I couldn't, I noted what they carried, where they positioned themselves, and who they were talking to. A man with a leather portfolio. A woman in a cream blazer who kept looking at the ceiling beams. 3 men near the fireplace who didn't touch the food. Vanessa had done it right. I'll give her that much. Fairy lights strung along the back porch railing. Catered appetizers arranged across the dining room table in the kind of deliberate spread that doesn't happen without advance planning. Soft jazz from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner, pitched just low enough to make conversation feel intimate. The house looked warm and welcoming, and exactly the way she had designed it to look like it belonged to her. She moved through the rooms in a dark red dress, laughing at precisely the right moments, refilling glasses without being asked, touching people lightly on the arm the way a hostess does when she wants you to feel included. She was very good at it. I had to admit that. She had turned my home into a stage and herself into the lead performer, and most of the people in that room had no idea they were watching a production. Derek was working the room differently. Quieter, more targeted, less interested in charm and more interested in results. He had gathered 3 men I had never seen before near the fireplace, and he was talking to them in that low, deliberate voice he uses when he needs someone to believe in something. The voice I used to mistake for conviction and had learned over the past 4 months was closer to calculation. The man with the leather portfolio had it open across one arm now. The man beside him kept nodding slowly, his eyes moving around the room at intervals, the particular sweep of a man who is estimating square footage and appraising finishes and running quiet numbers in his head. These were the investors. This was the pitch. And the prop he was using to sell them was the house I had paid for with 40 years of my life. I watched my son do that. I stood 10 feet away and watched him gesture toward the lake view through the back windows and describe the property like a man describing something he owned, free and clear. My chest went cold and flat, not rage, not the sharp grief I had felt in those first weeks. Something past both of those. Something that had been burning hot for 4 months and had finally burned all the way down to ash. What was left underneath the ash was not anger. It was clarity. Pure, cold, absolute clarity. Tara had set herself up near the back wall with her phone locked into a small tripod, live streaming the entire evening to her followers. She'd run an HDMI cable from her phone to the large flat-screen television mounted on the living room wall, the television I had purchased 3 years ago, and transported up here in the back of my truck, so that her video feed was playing on the big screen in real time. A house tour she had announced brightly to whoever was watching. A full walkthrough of the most gorgeous lake house in northern Michigan. She said it exactly like that, like she had written it in advance. I stood near the bookshelf and watched it all play out in front of me. Ruth Calloway materialized at my left elbow, moving with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had spent 30 years in county administration and knew how to cross a crowded room without drawing attention. Gus was 2 steps behind her, his hands in his jacket pockets, his expression the relaxed, unreadable face he'd probably perfected during 22 years as a deputy. Owen's outside. Ruth said, her voice just above a murmur. He arrived about 10 minutes ago. He's parked at the far end of the driveway, the dark blue sedan. Good, I said. I kept my eyes on the room. Deputy Voss is with him. Gus added, his voice just as low. Unmarked vehicle. She reviewed the full case file this afternoon, all the footage, the loan documents, the transcripts. She knows exactly what she's looking at. I nodded without turning my head. On the big screen, Tara was narrating her way through the kitchen, running her palm along the granite countertops, pulling cabinet doors open and pushing them shut, describing the natural light and the open layout to her viewers with the enthusiasm of someone who had decided this was her content now. Then she moved down the hallway toward the study, still talking, still filming her commentary, flowing without pause. She panned across the desk, across the shelving along the far wall. Across the corner of the room where Derek's laptop was sitting open on a side table, its screen still active, a browser window filling most of the display. She didn't slow down. She didn't notice. She was already describing the window view before the camera had fully cleared the desk. But the camera caught it. On the big screen, visible for approximately 4 seconds, sharp enough to read, because the camera was good quality and the room was well lit, was the subject line of an open email chain. On Derek's screen, re-property transfer timeline updated draft. 4 seconds. Then Tara moved into the hallway, and the laptop scrolled out of frame. But Brooke Dalton had been standing less than 3 feet from the television. I watched her face with the careful attention I'd been giving this room all evening. I watched the exact moment she processed what she had read, the slight narrowing at the outer corners of her eyes, the small, almost imperceptible tightening around her mouth. She didn't react dramatically. She was too composed for that. She simply lowered her champagne glass by about 4 inches, very slowly and very deliberately, and let her gaze travel from the television screen across the room to where Vanessa was laughing near the back door. The 2 investors near the fireplace had caught it as well. The one with the portfolio leaned toward the man beside him and said something I couldn't hear from where I was standing. The second man stopped nodding. His expression had shifted from interested to careful. Derek had not seen it yet. He was still talking, still projecting quiet confidence, still building the pitch for a future he had constructed on the foundation of someone else's home. His back was half turned to the television. Then something in the room changed, a shift in the quality of attention, subtle as a barometric drop before a storm. A few conversations dropped fractionally lower. A few sets of eyes moved toward Derek with a quality of attention that hadn't been there 60 seconds before. The laughter near the back door continued, but it was the only laughter still going. Derek felt it. I could see the moment it reached him, a half-second pause in his delivery, barely enough to notice if you weren't specifically watching for it. His eyes moved to the television screen, then back to his investors, then to Tara across the room. His jaw closed hard once. He moved across the room in 8 steps, fast enough to be purposeful, slow enough not to look like he was rushing. Reached behind the television and disconnected Tara's phone from the HDMI cable. The big screen went dark mid-sentence. Tara looked up from her tripod with wide, confused eyes, her mouth still forming words. Technical issue, Derek said pleasantly, turning back to the room with a relaxed smile. A few people laughed lightly. Someone made a comment about technology. The moment folded back in on itself like nothing had happened, but not for everyone in that room. Brooke Dalton set her champagne glass on the nearest flat surface and took out her phone. I watched her open her social media application, navigate directly to her own profile, and delete the story she had posted at the first housewarming party 3 weeks ago, the one that had shown the front of this house with a caption that read, "At Melissa's new lake house." She deleted it without hesitation, without expression, with the clean efficiency of a woman removing herself from a situation she had just recognized as dangerous. Then she dropped her phone back into her clutch and looked toward the front door. My water glass was empty. I set it down on the bookshelf. Across the room, Gus was already watching me. He had been watching me for the past 4 minutes, waiting. I held his gaze and gave him one short nod. He reached into his jacket pocket and sent a single text. I reached up and straightened my collar. I rolled my shoulders back once the way I used to before stepping onto a platform to address a crew after an incident. The way you stand when what you're about to say needs to land with the full weight of what you mean. Then I walked to the center of the room. "Could someone please turn off the music?" I said at once. Normal volume. From the center of the living room floor, I didn't raise my voice, didn't lift my hand, didn't do anything that a man does when he's trying to perform authority. He isn't sure he has. I just stood there in the middle of the room I had paid for in the house I had chosen for the years I had left, and I said it the way a man says something when he means it completely and is prepared to wait as long as it takes for the world to catch up with him. The music stopped. 43 people turned to look at me. The room went from noise and laughter and the clinking of glasses to near silence in the space of 4 seconds, the particular silence that falls when someone does something unexpected with complete unhurried calm. Not a scene. Not a confrontation. Just a man standing still in the middle of a crowd, waiting. Vanessa appeared from the left side of the room, moving fast, her dark red dress catching the light. She had her champagne flute in one hand, and her eyes were already working, scanning my face, calculating, trying to read how far this was going before it arrived. "Clifton, what are you? I want to thank everyone for coming tonight." I said over her without looking at her. "Before you leave, there are a few things you should know about this house, about who owns it and about what's been happening inside it." Clifton. Her voice dropped into a register I recognized, sharp, quiet, the tone of a woman accustomed to managing situations before they became problems. She stepped toward me. "This is not the time for this, Vanessa." I turned and looked at her directly for the first time all evening, not with anger, not with the grief that had been sitting in my chest since July, with something quieter than both of those and considerably more final. "It is exactly the time, and I think you know that. I think you've known it was coming for a while now." She stopped moving. Something crossed her face fast, unguarded, the first genuinely unscripted expression I had seen from her in 4 months. It wasn't anger, it was fear. The kind that comes not from being confronted, but from realizing the confrontation has already been prepared, that the ground you thought you were standing on was already gone before you walked onto it. Then Nora came out of the hallway. She walked slowly and deliberately, the way a woman moves when she has decided once and for all that she is done being underestimated. She was wearing the gray cardigan she kept on the back of her chair, the everyday one, the one she wore on quiet evenings when it was just the two of us, and she was carrying a document folder pressed flat against her chest with both hands, the way you carry something you have been keeping safe for a long time. Her chin was level. Her eyes were steady as the surface of the lake on a windless morning. The room felt the shift before anyone spoke. You could feel it move through the crowd, the way a change in pressure moves through a space, subtle, physical, something in the air, adjusting. "My name is Nora Marsh," she said. Her voice was clear and even, and it carried to every corner of the room without her having to raise it at all. "This house belongs to me. The deed is registered in my name, and I have it here." She held up the folder just briefly, then brought it back against her chest. "My husband and I purchased this property in June of this year. I have never transferred it to anyone. I have never agreed to transfer it to anyone. I have never signed any document giving any other person authority over this property." She looked at Derek then directly without flinching, and her eyes held the particular steadiness of a woman who has carried a grief most people will never touch, who came out the other side of it, still standing, still whole. Including my son. The color left Derek's face so completely and so fast that for a moment he looked like a man who had just heard something from a great distance, something he hadn't believed would ever actually arrive. Owen Parrish came through the front door, briefcase in hand. 63 years old, gray at both temples, moving with the unhurried confidence of a man who has walked into difficult rooms before and always walked back out with exactly what he came for. He positioned himself near the edge of the gathering without crowding it and addressed the room in a voice that was clear without being loud. Owen Parrish, attorney at law representing Clifton and Nora Marsh. He set his briefcase on the coffee table and opened it with a pair of precise, practiced clicks. I have documentation here confirming the property deed recorded at the Antrim County Register of Deeds, the Revocable Living Trust, established at the time of purchase naming Clifton and Nora Marsh as co-trustees, and recorded evidence of unauthorized attempts to obtain financial control of this property through fraudulent means. He looked up briefly at the room, not dramatically, just to make sure he had their attention. I'll keep this brief. He did. 3 minutes and 40 seconds, give or take. He laid it out, fact by fact, the way a good attorney always does the deed, the trust structure, the 2 unauthorized loan filings using the property address as collateral, the authorization form with the buried encumbrance and disposition clause that Vanessa had placed in front of Nora on a Thursday morning in August. He didn't editorialize. He didn't embellish. He simply stacked one documented fact on top of another until the shape of what had been attempted was visible to everyone in the room. Near the fireplace, the man with the leather portfolio had closed it. He was looking at his phone. The investor beside him had taken a small, almost involuntary step to the left, away from where Derek was standing. I opened my laptop. The footage ran for 90 seconds. First clip, Vanessa at the kitchen counter, phone to her ear, voice low and completely clear. The old man's not going to last much longer anyway. Once she signs, it's a done deal. Derek just needs to stop second-guessing himself and push harder. Second clip, Derek and Vanessa in the same kitchen, 11 o'clock at night, speaking close and quiet. Don't push her directly. Let her think she's making the choice herself. Build the habit first. Once she's comfortable letting us handle things, the signature is just the next natural step. 43 people stood in the living room of my home and listened to my son's voice give step-by-step instructions for taking my wife's house away from her. The room was so quiet I could hear the lake outside the back windows. Derek's jaw was working, but nothing was coming out. He looked at Vanessa. She was staring at the floor, her champagne flute hanging loose from 2 fingers, as though she had forgotten it existed. The dark red dress that had looked so assured and triumphant 90 minutes ago looked different now, like a costume, like something worn to a party that had quietly become something else entirely while she wasn't watching. I looked at Vanessa. I kept my voice even, not cruel, because cruelty was never what this was about. Then in 2009, I said, "Your father was 2 months from losing everything he had. $340,000 in debt, 1 missed payment from the bank calling the whole note. 1 phone call from someone he'd never met changed what happened next." I held her gaze. Her chin had started to tremble. I made that call. I never told anyone. I never expected anything in return, and I still don't. I paused once long enough for it to land. But I will keep what is mine. Brooke Dalton set her champagne glass on the mantelpiece with a quiet, definitive click, picked her coat off the back of a chair, and walked to the front door without looking at anyone. She didn't rush. She didn't slam anything. She simply left the way a person leaves when they've decided they want no part of what comes next. 3 other guests followed within the next 2 minutes. Deputy Renee Voss stepped through the front door, 45 years old, Antrim County Sheriff's Department, in plain clothes, but with her badge clipped visibly to her belt. She had spent that afternoon reviewing the complete case file. She stood near the entrance and spoke to the room in a voice that was professional and entirely without drama, the voice of someone who has delivered this particular type of information before and has learned that calm is more effective than force. "The property at this address is legally held by Clifton and Nora Marsh," she said. "Any individuals currently residing here without the documented consent of the legal property owners will be required to make arrangements to vacate." She let that sit for exactly 1 second. I'm here tonight in a civil capacity. If this matter is not resolved voluntarily and promptly, formal trespass proceedings will be initiated through the court. She looked at Derek, then at Vanessa, then at Tara, who had both hands pressed flat over her mouth, her back against the wall, her tripod still standing in the corner like a forgotten prop. I strongly encourage everyone to make good decisions tonight. Vanessa looked at Derek. Her eyes were searching his face with a desperation she was no longer able to conceal, looking for a plan, a reversal, any remaining move. Derek looked at the floor. His hands hung at his sides. For the first time since the moving truck had pulled into my driveway 5 months ago, he had nothing to say, and nowhere to put his hands, and no version of the story left to tell. 43 people who had arrived at this house an hour and a half ago, believing they were celebrating something new and promising, stood in the living room of a man who had earned every square foot of it and understood quietly and without ceremony what they had actually walked into. I stood in the center of the room. I kept my hands still and my shoulders straight, and I let the truth do what the truth always does when you give it enough space and enough time. It finished the work I had started. The guests left first. Quietly, the way people leave when they've witnessed something they didn't expect and aren't sure what to do with. Coats pulled on quickly, goodbyes murmured, low eyes averted from Derek and Vanessa as they passed. The man with the leather portfolio shook no one's hand on his way out. He just walked to his car and drove away, and the 2 men he'd come with followed 30 seconds behind him. By 9:15, the house was down to the people who lived in it and the people who didn't. Owen stood near the dining table, patient as a stone wall, watching. Deputy Voss stood by the front door with her hands clasped in front of her and gave Derek and Vanessa the kind of look that a 20-year law enforcement officer gives people when she's already decided how this ends and is simply waiting for them to arrive at the same conclusion. Tara had already started packing. I noticed that first she had both hands over her mouth during the footage playback, but the moment Deputy Voss finished speaking, something in her expression shifted from shock to pure, uncomplicated self-preservation. She slipped out of the living room, went upstairs, and within 10 minutes, I could hear the soft thud of bags being filled above my head. At least she understood the situation clearly. Vanessa stood in the center of the living room for a long moment, her red dress and her carefully arranged evening completely undone. Her eyes moved around the room to Owen, to Deputy Voss, to the laptop on the coffee table, still open to the frozen footage, and I watched her search for a door that wasn't there. "This is not legal," she said finally. Her voice strained tight. You can't force us out of..." "Mrs. Cole Marsh." Owen's voice was quiet and entirely without malice. "You have been residing in this property without a lease agreement, without written consent from the owners, and while actively attempting to obtain fraudulent control of the title. The owners are present and have formally requested your departure in front of a law enforcement witness." He paused. "I would strongly advise you to begin making arrangements. Tonight." Vanessa's chin trembled. Just once. Then her jaw locked back into place, and she turned to Derek, her eyes burning. "Say something," she hissed. "Derek, say something." Derek was looking at the floor. "Derek." Her voice cracked up the middle. 4 months. 4 months of this, and you're just going to stand there." He raised his head slowly. His face was gray and hollowed out like a man who had been running on borrowed time and had just run out. He looked at Vanessa. He looked at me. Then he looked back at the floor. "Start packing," he said quietly. The sound that came out of Vanessa was not quite a word. She turned and walked up the stairs, and the sharp crack of a door closing followed 3 seconds later. Tara came back downstairs. First bags in both hands, ring light tucked under her arm. She passed me in the hallway without stopping, but at the front door she slowed, and I saw her shoulders pull in something almost like shame, which was more than I'd expected from her. She walked out without looking back. I slept badly that night. In the morning, gray November sky lake, flat as pewter. I was standing at the kitchen window with my coffee when I heard Derek's voice outside. Low, strained, the voice of a man trying to hold something together with his hands and feeling it come apart anyway. I looked out. He was on the dock with Milo. Vanessa had brought the kids over that morning to collect the last of their things. Milo and Lily waited outside while their parents loaded the final boxes. Lily was sitting on the porch steps with her backpack drawing something in a notebook. Milo had walked straight past his parents, past the moving boxes stacked near the garage all the way to the end of the dock. Derek had followed him. I watched through the kitchen window. I couldn't hear everything, just fragments. Derek's voice, explanatory, defensive. Milo's face turned away toward the water. Then Milo turned around. Even from across the yard, I could see the set of his jaw, that particular expression, that meant he had made up his mind about something and wasn't going to be talked out of it. He was 14 years old, and he looked in that moment about 40. He said loud enough to carry across the water to where I stood. "Were you really going to take Grandpa's house?" The dock went very quiet. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. He ran one hand through his hair and looked out at the lake, and I watched my son search for the version of himself that could answer that question honestly and come up empty. Milo waited. His hands were balled at his sides, his jaw working. "I was trying to solve a problem," Derek said finally. His voice was raw. "The money, the debts, I was trying to—" "With Grandpa's house," Milo said. Not a question. Derek pressed his lips together. He nodded once, barely. Milo let out a breath, shaky, controlled the breath of someone working very hard not to cry. He looked at his father for a long moment, and whatever he saw there, it confirmed something he had been hoping wasn't true. "Okay," he said, just that word. Then he turned and walked back up the dock toward the house. He passed me in the kitchen doorway without stopping, but his hand touched my arm briefly, just a second, just contact, and then he went to find his sister. I stood at the door and watched Derek standing alone on the dock, hands in his pockets, staring at the water. He stood there for a long time. Long enough that Vanessa came out twice and called his name, and both times he didn't move. The last boxes came out around noon. Vanessa set her key on the kitchen table without a word. Then Tara's key appeared beside it. A moment later, she must have left it on her way out the door. 2 keys on my kitchen table, the same keys that had locked me out of my own front door 4 months ago. I picked them up and held them in my palm for a moment. Then Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway. He stood there with his jacket on and his car keys in his hand, and he looked at me for the first time since the night before. His eyes were red at the rims. His face was tight with the particular misery of a man who knows he has no one to blame and can't stop trying to find someone anyway. He didn't speak, but neither did he look away. And for a few seconds we just stood there in the kitchen of the house. I had built my retirement around father and son, the distance between us so wide it had no name. Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a sound so ordinary it almost hurt. I stood in my kitchen. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been since June. I could hear the lake outside. I could hear Nora moving in the next room. I put the keys in my pocket and let myself breathe. After the storm, there's always paperwork. Owen called the following Tuesday and ran through everything methodically the way he always did. No drama, no editorializing, just the facts laid out in sequence, like the ties on a railroad track, one after another, leading somewhere solid. The lending group out of Grand Rapids flagged Derek's loan account 3 days ago, he said. When the property title failed to transfer as documented in his application, the collateral representation defaulted. They've initiated an internal fraud review. I expect you'll hear nothing from that process directly. It's between Derek and the lender, and eventually the relevant authorities. You don't need to do a thing. I sat with that for a moment. Somewhere across town or across the state, my son was beginning to understand the full weight of what he'd set in motion. I didn't feel satisfaction about that. I want to be honest about that. What I felt was something closer to exhaustion, the specific tiredness of a man who fought something he should never have had to fight in the first place. And the civil side? I asked. Clean, Owen said. The trust is intact, the deed is clear, and the POA has been formally recorded. Nobody touches that property without both your signatures, not now, not ever. A pause. There's one more thing. I received a report from the social media platforms where Tara Cole had been broadcasting. Multiple users filed complaints about unauthorized filming in a private residence. Both her primary accounts have been suspended indefinitely. I thought about Tara, 33 years old, ring light under her arm, walking through my front door like she owned the entry hall. I didn't enjoy her consequence, but I didn't mourn it either. Thank you, Owen, I said, for all of it. That's what you pay me for, he said. Then quieter. You did good, Cliff. Both of you did. I hung up and sat in the kitchen for a while. The house was different now. Not just quiet or different in the way a room is different when the furniture has been rearranged and your body hasn't caught up yet. I kept expecting to hear footsteps above me. Kept expecting Tara's voice floating through the ceiling or the sound of someone in the upstairs bathroom at 7 in the morning. The absence of it had its own texture. Nora came in from the garden around 4, pulling off her gloves, cheeks pink from the November cold. She stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at me. Owen called, she asked. It's handled, I said. All of it. She nodded slowly. She crossed the kitchen, filled a glass of water at the sink, and drank half of it looking out the back window at the lake. Then she turned around. Come sit outside with me, she said. Just for a little while. We put our coats on and sat on the back porch in the November cold, 2 old people in 2 chairs with a blanket across both our laps that Nora had brought from inside. The lake was steel gray and still. The trees along the far bank had gone bare, and the sky above them was the particular white of a Michigan afternoon that can't decide between sun and cloud. Nora put her hand over mine on the armrest. You didn't yell, she said. Not once. Through all of it. Didn't need to, I said. She squeezed my hand. I know, but I want you to know I noticed. I looked at her, 68 years old, gray, coming in at her temples, the lines around her eyes that had deepened in the years since we lost Eli. This woman who had pressed her palms against a porch railing in June and said it was exactly how she'd pictured it. Who had called a lawyer before I even knew we needed one. Who had held the deed to our life together in both hands and walked into a room full of strangers and said, "This is mine." I never gave it away. My throat tightened. My eyes went hot, and I didn't bother trying to stop it. I'm sorry it took this long, I said. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were bright, not with tears, with something warmer. We got here, she said simply. That's what matters. We sat there until the light went gray and the temperature dropped, and neither of us moved to go inside, because after 5 months of noise and intrusion and the particular loneliness of being a stranger in your own home, The quiet was something we needed to stay inside of for a while. The call came on Christmas Eve. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang, and I looked at the screen and saw Milo's name and felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was still wound tight. "Hey, Grandpa." His voice was careful at first, feeling out whether he was welcome the way a 14-year-old does when he's done something brave and isn't sure yet how it landed. "Hey, Bud," I said. "Merry Christmas." A pause. Then quieter. "Is it okay that I called?" "More than okay," I said. "It's the best call I've gotten all month." I heard him breathe out relief, young and unguarded. "Grandpa, can Lily and I come stay after Christmas just for a few days, Ma?" I answered before he finished the sentence. "Yes," I said. "Come whenever you want. This house is always open to you." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Thank you, Grandpa." "Thank you, Milo," I said. "For everything." I hung up and stood in the kitchen of my house, the house Nora and I had paid for with 4 decades of early mornings and careful choices, and I thought about what it means to build something. Not just a structure, a life. The kind that outlasts the people who try to dismantle it. The lake was dark outside the window. Patient. Still. It never changes. August came back around. The lake looked exactly the same as it had the first morning we sat beside it. Clear water, still surface, the far bank lined with trees that had gone from green to bare to green again without asking anyone's permission. That's the thing about water. It doesn't hold grudges. It doesn't remember who hurt whom or who won or who lost. It just keeps being water, patient and indifferent, and somehow that has always been the most comforting thing I know. Milo and Lily arrived on a Friday afternoon in early August 2025. Milo was 15 now, a full inch taller than he'd been at Christmas. His voice settled into something lower and steadier. Lily was 11 and made up for whatever gravity her brother had gained by running straight from the car to the back lawn, with her arms out like she was trying to catch the whole summer in one motion. "Grandma!" she shouted, spotting Nora in the garden. "Grandma, I learned to do a cartwheel, watch. Okay, don't watch yet. I'm not ready. Okay, now watch." Nora's laugh carried all the way to the porch where I was standing with my coffee, full and warm and completely unguarded. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in a long time. My chest felt like something was gently putting itself back together inside it. Milo came up the porch steps with his bag over his shoulder. He was quieter than Lily always had been, but there was something different in the way he carried himself now. Less tension in the shoulders. Less of that watching for something quality in his eyes. He looked at me and smiled. Not a performance. Just a smile. "Hey, Grandpa." "Hey, Bud." I put my hand out, and he shook it. Not a kid's handshake, a real one. Firm and deliberate. It surprised me, and I felt my throat tighten a little. "You look good." "You too," he said. Then glancing at the lake, "Can we fish later?" "Already set up 2 rods on the dock," I said. He grinned at that, quick and bright, the same grin he'd had at 7 years old, and pushed through the screen door into the house. Before dinner, I went into the small room off the hallway. Eli's room, we still called it, even though it hadn't been his, in the way rooms belong to people who are living. The photographs were back on the shelf. The second-grade drawing was tacked back to the corkboard. The cedar box sat in the center of the shelf, where it had always been, where it was supposed to be, where no one had touched it since I brought it back from the trash can 14 months ago. I put my hand on top of the box for a moment. The wood was warm from the afternoon sun coming through the window. "We're okay, buddy," I said quietly. My voice came out a little rough at the edges, but it held. "We're okay." After dinner, pot roast Lily's enthusiastic narration of every ingredient, I took Milo down to the dock. We fished in the easy quiet that exists between people who don't need to fill every second with words. The lake went gold around us, and the air started to cool, and neither of us was in any hurry to be anywhere else. Milo reeled in a small bass and carefully released it, watching it kick back into the water. "Grandpa," he said, not looking up from the water, "do you ever hear from Dad?" I considered the question honestly, the way it deserved. "No," I said. "Not since last November." Milo nodded slowly. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't crushed either, and that was its own kind of complicated thing, watching a 15-year-old come to terms with who his father was. His jaw worked for a moment. His eyes stayed on the water. "Is that hard for you?" he asked. The question caught me somewhere under the ribs. My eyes went hot for just a second, that burn you feel when something true lands before you're ready for it. "Yes," I said. "It's hard. He's my son." That part doesn't stop. I looked out at the lake. But I made peace with the fact that I can't change what he chose. I can only be responsible for what I choose. Milo turned that over for a moment. Then he nodded again, slower this time, like something was settling into place. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a key. New cut plain silver with a small piece of blue tape on the head that I'd put there so it wouldn't get confused with anything else. "Here," I said, holding it out to him. He looked at it, then at me. "Grandpa, this house should have someone young who knows its worth," I said. "Someone who will respect what it took to build it. I can't think of anyone better qualified." Milo took the key with both hands. His fingers closed around it carefully, like he understood it wasn't just metal. He looked up, and his eyes were bright the way eyes get when you're 15 and trying very hard to be steady and almost managing it. "I won't lose it," he said. His voice came out thick. "I know you won't." I put my hand on the back of his neck the way I used to when he was small. "Milo, I spent 40 years earning this house. Your father lost his right to it in 4 weeks. I held his gaze and made sure every word landed clean. I'm not telling you that to hurt him. I'm telling you so you understand what a man builds with his hands and his years. That is not just property. That is who he is. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." Milo's chin trembled once. He pressed his lips together hard, fighting it, and his eyes went bright and wet at the edges. He nodded quick, fierce, the nod of someone making a promise to themselves as much as to me. Then he reached over and put his arm around my shoulders and leaned against me the way he used to as a little boy. And I put my arm around him, and we sat like that on the dock while the sun finished going down over Torch Lake. Lily's voice floated out from the back lawn where she was trying to convince Nora to watch one more cartwheel. Nora's laugh answered her. The water held still. The evening settled in around us, quiet and unhurried the way it does when you've finally stopped waiting for something to go wrong. The water doesn't change, but the people sitting beside it do. And sometimes, if you're patient enough and stubborn enough and lucky enough, they change into exactly who you hoped they'd become. I've told you this story the only way I know how, straight, without dressing it up. This is one of those grandpa stories that I wish I didn't have to tell. Not because it didn't happen, but because no man should have to fight his own son for the right to sleep in his own bed. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple: protect what you build. Not just with locks and lawyers, but with clarity. Write it down. Make it legal. Don't assume love is enough to protect what you've spent a lifetime earning, because love, when it gets mixed up with debt and desperation, can become something you no longer recognize. I made the mistake of thinking a handshake and good faith were enough. They weren't. Don't be like me in that regard. Get the paperwork right from the beginning. I also believe, and I say this as a man who has been humbled more than once, that God doesn't let things stay broken forever. Not if you're willing to do the work and wait for the right moment. That's what I held on to through the worst of it. These grandpa stories aren't just about old men and property disputes. They're about dignity, about what we owe each other as a family. And sometimes a family story isn't pretty, but it's still worth telling, because someone out there needs to hear it before it happens to them. If this family story moved you, if something in Clifton and Nora's story felt familiar, share it with someone you love. Leave a comment and tell me what would you have done differently. And if you want more grandpa stories like this one, you know what to do: subscribe, so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. And one last thing. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements, crafted purely to illustrate real human truths. If that's not the kind of content you're looking for, no hard feelings, step away, and find what speaks to you. But if you're staying, I promise to always make it worth your time.